I have some apples left over, so I'm going to make some apple cider today. Nothing better than hot apple cider on a cold day. I have lots of leftover apples, so I'm going to take anything that's bumped and bruised and scar it up a little bit, and I'm going to create apple cider. Stay tuned, and I'll show you how I do that. The first thing you're going to need is a large crock pot. This is my largest one I have without going into a roaster pan. I usually will put a half a gallon of water in and preheat it. The next thing is I'm going to add two whole cinnamon sticks. If you like a lot of cinnamon, you can add more. You can experiment. So 2 of those. Next, I'm going to add 10 whole cloves. You can put more in, but I'd be careful. I found that if I add more cloves, it makes it a little bitter. So I'll go better off to go with less cloves than more cloves is what I've found. So I'm going to add that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice up half an orange. You can put as many slices of orange in as you want, but this is supposed to be really about the apple, not the orange. The citrus just adds a little bit extra depth of flavor. So I'm just going to slice this orange until I get about half of it sliced. That way I have the other half for another batch. I have a lot of apples. I'm going to cut them in half again. And I'm going to add these in. That water is pretty hot. The next thing you want to do is take your oranges, and I like to rinse them off. Make sure I don't have any actual rot going on, although you can cut the rot out if you want. But I like to rinse them off. My apples that I grew myself in my yard are 100% organic. I didn't use any spray. I actually have a organic moth trap that I use, and I have a video I'll link below if you want to see how I did that. And it worked really well. I'll add some video in here where I went and I harvested these apples so you can see what the trees looked like. They were absolutely loaded this year. We have a bumper year. Apples are biennial. They only produce really heavy fruit loads every other year. But this is a bumper crop year. So here I've washed a few of these. So what I like to do is to quarter the apples, and when I'm looking for insects, just in case one got by the trap. Every once in a while I'll find at least one, so I just quarter them. Then I'm going to cut the core out and any other bad spots that I don't want left in. This red variety is called Haralson, and I've already made an apple crisp, and I'm making other delicious treats as well. But today is about the cider. We're going to get freezing temperatures this weekend, I think. It's going to get down to freezing or really close. I still have a lot of gardening left to do. Leave me a comment below. Do you have apples at your house, and which varieties do you have? This variety here, this yellow variety, is a honey gold. So I'm using 2 different kinds of apples. I find that doing a mix is nice. This honey gold is really an eating apple. It's good for applesauce as well. You're going to continue to core apples until you get the crock pot about 90% full. What will happen is the apples soak up the brine, which is the water and the herbs. They will swell and they'll start to float. That's why you want to leave some room at the top, because these apples will swell. So here I've got a couple of bad spots. I'm just going to cut those off, toss it in. I was really pleased to see how well our apples did this year. We've been in a really terrible drought. I watered every week. So here's one that has a little bad spot right there. And I'm just going to cut that off. So we'll just cut it open. And we'll see how bad it is. If it's too bad, like this part right here is kind of nasty, I'll just throw this in the compost. I won't even bother because I have so many apples. You can just cut the bad parts out. My grandparents were in the Great Depression and they didn't waste anything. So here you can see I have the crock pot 90% full. I'm going to add more water so that the apples are covered with the water. They will float a little bit, but that's okay. You just want to make sure you're within that ½ inch of the top. These apples are going to swell and really float up in the end. So now I'm going to cover the crock pot and I'm going to let them cook on high heat for about 5 hours. I will check them at the 3-hour mark, and if they're floating up or starting to boil over, I will turn the heat down to a low cook for the remaining time. When we're done with that step, we will come back and let them cool and strain them. Kitty decided she wanted to help me this morning, and she's pushing on my tripod. Yes, now she's taking a bath. Welcome back. I let the apples stew overnight at a very low heat because it just got to be too late in the day for me. And then I cranked the heat up this morning to bring it back up to a boil, and now I'm going to strain the apples. So all I do is use a double colander. So here's a colander in a pan. Now I'm going to scoop out the solids to make sure I get all of the good juice drained. Then I will further strain the liquid to make sure that I get most of the solids out. Having some solids is not a problem. If you like to have a little bit more pulp, you only have to do one straining. You also want to make sure you get the cinnamon sticks and the cloves out, which is why I do the second straining. Here I've scraped the apples to one side to leave some holes, and I'm going to pour in the juices. I decided to switch to a measuring cup to make this job a lot faster. So I'm going to be pouring this in. The very last part I will lift and pour in. We're going to let this seep in. This might take an hour or more. You can see it's still kind of cooling and doing that. So we're going to let that continue to drip through there. And then I'll do a second straining. Then we'll proceed on to the next step, which is canning for long-term storage, if it lasts that long. It's been about an hour and I've let the juices drip out of the apples, and now I'm ready to do the straining. The sieve will collect the additional solids and just further screen it down so it's a little bit less. So all I'm going to do is pour the liquid over the sieve. There's a little bit of solid left, but I'm okay with that. Now we'll proceed to the canning phase. All right, I'm back. I have my sterilized jars fresh out of the dishwasher. I have my rings and lids, which I have boiled on the stove. And then I have the cider, which is really hot. So we're going to go ahead and pour that. And I'm going to use this measuring cup again because it's just easier to pour, I think, into these 1-quart jars. We tend to like cider hot, so we'll heat it up. The cider will make for a good cocktail too if you add a little bit of whiskey to it on a cold day, and we're starting to get into that cold weather now. I like it plain. Could also put another cinnamon stick in it and enjoy it that way. We're getting down to the bottom here, so I am going to free pour the remaining one. That's going to be perfect. Exactly 3 quarts. The next thing that I want to do is to clean off the top of the jar to make sure that there's no sticky substances on there, anything that will keep the seal. And then I'm going to lift the lids and the rings on. These are fairly hot. And when I put the rings on, I'm simply going to finger tighten them. I'm simply going to finger tighten them. And then I'm going to move them into a water bath. The quart jars, I do a water bath for 18 minutes, or you can do 20 if you want. But we're just going to go ahead and get them submerged, and then we'll be back. I'm back. So during the time it took to do the 18-minute hot water bath, I was able to clean up the kitchen, which is kind of nice. So last but not least, don't forget to label your jars so you know when you produce them. This process is a little bit labor intensive, but it's really rewarding. It makes the house smell wonderful while it's cooking, and it tastes delicious to drink. If this video is helpful, give us a thumbs up so YouTube knows to share this content with others. Also consider subscribing so you don't miss any of our other great videos. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.